Ah. Right, we'll just get the cat out because the cat's... Bumble, come on. Out. Because the cat's knocking the camera all over the place. And then we can start talking African cichlids once we get a few more people in the chat. Welcome to those that have joined. Wanted to turn the focus back on to the African cichlids a little bit on this channel because I've strayed a bit away from it, starting other projects. And African cichlids really is the channel's niche. You know, it's what got the channel going. It's my sort of primary way of enjoying the hobby. Meaning to ask, where are you? I'm in just in Macclesfield, well, Congleton in Cheshire. So just a little bit south of Manchester is where I'm based. It's not a great area for getting African cichlids, to be honest with you. Not so much African cichlids, more the haplochromices. Finding them really hard to get, especially in, you know, a decent size. I've actually had a trip down to Wharf Aquatics today in Nottingham. Great fish shop, really, really nice shop, loads of fish in there. But again, I think it's, you know, when you're looking at sort of African cichlids and stuff, there's not a high demand for them, so they don't get some of the real showpiece haps in, which is the sort of stuff I'm looking for. Like I've got the Venustus, I've got the Livingstone hap, I've got the, you know, the basics, your common haps, things like that. But I'm really after some oddball stuff now, and I'm finding it really hard to get a hold of. I've started a grow out tank so I can start getting some of the smaller, because the trouble I have is when I'm finding them, they're usually in really small sizes. So the problem is I can't put small sized fish in here because of things like the Rostratus and the Fusco. They'll gobble them up. So the plan is to start getting some smaller haps in, you know, taking a little bit of a gamble, getting a few in the hopes that I get a male out of it. And then once they grow in a little bit, then I can start introducing them into the show tank. But I'm just finding them really hard to find. It's getting really frustrating because I had a vision for this tank where I wanted it to mainly be a haplochromis display, with, you know, a couple of nice peacocks in there. But yeah, I'm just finding it really hard to find some decent haps to go in it now because they're quite big. And it's getting a little bit frustrating. So, I mean, if any of you know, some decent breeders, I don't care where they are in the country, you know, I'll travel to them, that are selling some of these, you know, hard to get hold of haplochromices, then I'd be most appreciative to know if anyone could put me in contact with them. But yeah, it's becoming a little bit of a frustration because I'm going to these really good fish shops, and then I'm leaving disappointed. And it's not because they're bad shops, you know, I completely understand that. You know, when you're a real enthusiast on African cichlids, it's hard to get what you want in fish shops because the demand isn't there for it. So it's not, you know, it's not in the best interest of the fish shop to be getting those fish in, because they'd be difficult to sell. But it is frustrating going into shows. One of the main reasons I've started doing planted tanks down in the cellar, why I've set up the big paludarium, so the 7-foot paludarium build as well. It's, this beast. It's so that I can get a little bit more diversity in the fish room, and that way I can, when I'm going to these fish shops, I'm not always going, leaving the actual shop disappointed. There's always going to be something there for me that I can buy or I can look at and weigh up. So, yeah, at the moment, and for the past couple of years, I've just been, solely focused on African cichlids, and picking them up's been okay up until now because I've got most of the stuff that's being sold in shops. And I don't want loads of duplicates in this tank. I want a variety of different things. So when people come and see it, there's loads of different stuff in there that I can talk about and stuff in there that people won't commonly see about in the shops and stuff. There's a couple in there. I mean, I've got the Malawi hawks, which are growing on nicely, and they're becoming a little bit more readily available now. I've seen a few places that are selling them at small sizes, but they've been a tough one to get hold of. And when they grow in and get some good size on them, it'll be a real centerpiece fish in this display. So that's what I'm after, something that's show stopping, that I can introduce into this and really appreciate. I wouldn't mind another star sapphire. Again, they're hard to get hold of in a good size. So, most of the ones I see are at fry stage. The problem with the fry stage is I don't want female fish. And it's not so much the way they look. I don't mind the way they look. If there's a couple of grey fish in the tank, that wouldn't particularly bother me. It's the breeding. African cichlids are prolific breeders, so I don't want loads of babies in the tank getting eaten. I don't want them either of having to separate them, raise them in separate tanks. So ideally, I don't really want any female fish, but it's going to have to be something that I'm going to need to deal with when I'm getting these smaller African cichlids. I'm running a bit of a gamble because they're impossible to sex when they're 5-6 centimeters big. You have to have a really, really keen eye to be able to tell the difference. Sometimes there is some signs, but the problem is, I can't go in and see them and make my own choice. I have to order the majority of these online and get them delivered, which is a risk because the shops aren't going to sex them for me, not reliably anyway. So, yeah, a little bit of a frustration, a little bit ongoing. I don't want to put mboonas in this display either. So, I could, go out and get some mboonas and fill it up with that, but it's sort of a rule that I stand by when it comes to African cichlids, is not to mix the mboonas with peacock cichlids. I have done it. I've done it in the past, and I've not had the greatest results from it. The diets are mixing up. It's hard to target feed the fish. So from that point, I've decided that I'm not going to mix mboonas with any peacocks and haps, just for dietary and scaping reasons, what they require in the tank. And also they can be a little bit more aggressive, the mboonas. So you'd think these predator haps, would hold their own against them. They don't. So, when them mboonas pack a decent bit of size on, even the smaller ones can start bullying big predator haps. It's quite surprising to see when you have them in the tank with them. So, yeah, I don't want to fill the tank up with mboonas. And ideally, I'd quite like to offload some of the peacock cichlids from this tank and just have it as, there's a lot of haps in there now, but primarily haps with just a few of the peacocks that I've had for a while in there that I know can hold their own. Because I'm getting peacocks in there, And because the haps are so big, the hierarchy is, very hap heavy. And, some of the peacocks are colouring down off the back of it, which ideally I don't want, fish colouring down in the tank. And you're always going to get it with peacock cichlids. Even if they're not juiced, they can still colour down, just based on the hierarchy and the dominance in the tank. And some of these haps are getting quite hard for the peacock cichlids to compete with now. So, yeah, becoming a little bit of a frustration. It's sometimes African cichlids can come across as quite an easy sort of fish to keep because they don't require a complicated scape, and you can just dump all the fish in and off you pop. Really isn't like that when you start getting in, when you start becoming bothered about colorations and really something that's showpiece. Then it becomes quite difficult to manage. That's where it really, have to start thinking about hierarchy, sizes of the fish that you keep in. It gets a little bit complicated. You're always going to have that dominant fish in the tank, but you want to try and keep all the fish as happy and as confident as you can. And that primarily is where the colour is coming from in your fish. So it's not always, there's loads of how-to videos, and it's about, what you feed your fish and things like that, and water parameters, which have the part to play. Water parameters, I think, is a big one, especially when it comes to pH and your water hardness. It's important to get that right. But the main thing is hierarchy in the tank and dominance. So yeah, that's what I've found the best results on for coloration. Tank's looking good. Thanks, John. Appreciate that, mate. Are you close to Manchester? Yeah, I'm quite close to Manchester. Not far at all. The Urmston Aquatics have some really nice, colourful fish, but Spud at Manchester Fins, he primarily stocks peacock cichlids, and he has got a few nice haps in there as well. So he's got a good batch, but I don't want any more peacocks, and all the haps that he's currently stocking, I already have in my tank, either one or two of already. Which is, one of the reasons why I haven't been getting myself down there all that much recently, is just because I don't really need any more peacock cichlids, and I think I've been buying peacocks for the sake of it, because I can't find the haplochromases that I'm looking for, so I'm getting impatient, going out buying peacock cichlids that I don't particularly want. And then, I'm taking up space for haps when I get the opportunity to get it. So I'm trying to be a little bit more patient now and sort of dial back a bit on the peacock cichlids. Just sold my big tank. Worry of a leak kept me up at night. Don't know if that's just me. Did it already have a leak, Lidster, or were you just sort of worrying about the catastrophic damage that could come off the back of it? Wondered Earthling's fish reduced, they're so bright. It's hard to tell, John. I've had a couple of them that have coloured down in the tank. They are from Thailand, which is renowned for juicing their peacock cichlids. But it's hard to tell. I mean, I've got some peacocks in here that are doing really well, which have really held the colour, that are from Urmston Aquatics. So this Apache one here, that's an Urmston fish. And then this red OB peacock cichlid I've got in here as well, that's also from Urmston Aquatics. And then I've got a VC10 hap in here that is from Urmston. That's got some nice colour on it, that didn't when I bought it, but has coloured up. But the haps aren't usually as much subject to as the same sort of juicing as peacock cichlids are. But I have had a couple of peacocks from there that have also coloured down quite dramatically as well. So it's hard to tell. I mean, it's, you know, they are very bright, but there's, you know, it's just a difficult one. It's hard to get them, you know, every shop I've been into where I've bought peacock cichlids from, you know, it's really hard to tell because it's such a prolific practice in these places that supply them to the fish shops, that it is a bit of a gamble. And from speaking to people who own fish shops and run fish shops, it is one of the primary reasons why they don't actually like buying them in and selling them, is because people will just call them juiced. So it's a catch-22. I mean, they're very hard to get hold of unjuiced. It's not the shops that juice them, it's the suppliers. So, you know, these shops won't know that when they're buying them in. By the time people have bought them all and get them back in the tanks, they can colour down either from the fact that they're juiced, or they are. It's a hierarchy thing. What I will say is all the peacock cichlids that I've bought at Urmston, none of them have ended up being female fish, which is usually how you find out if they're definitely juiced or not, is they end up holding eggs inside of your tank, which I have had that. I've got a female fish in there at the moment from a shop called Just Fins in Stoke, which is closed now. But that had really solid male characteristics, bright blue body, a patchy stripe. Now it's just grey in the tank, so it just went to a female fish. If I want to get a tank your size, do you suggest getting a bunch of smaller fish and see what you have when they grow, or just buy grown guaranteed males? I'll be honest with you, Jerry, I would, if I could do this tank again, I would definitely start with smaller sized fish and see what I get out of it. It's cost effective because those fish are cheaper and you can get a couple of them, just in case you do get a couple of females. The only problem is when you do get them small, you can't sex them. So that's the main issue. And that's why I started this tank with larger sized fish. So that I knew I was getting males because I wanted an all male display. But the situation that I'm in now is, you know, most of the fish that I want, I can only get in smaller sizes, and those smaller sizes I can't put into this tank with the rest of the fish. So if I could do this again, if I restarted this tank, you know, if I had a tank crash and I lost all these fish and I needed to restart it, I definitely think I would start with small sized fish and see what I get out of that batch. So yeah, I mean, it's a great question, that, and it's a question that I was asking myself when I did set this one up, is what do I want to do? Yeah, if I had to start again, that is what I would do. So Clarence, no, I don't use an Instagram account, unfortunately, John. I do have a TikTok account, so if you go onto TikTok and follow me on there, I've got some content on there, and I do get on there and do some lives every now and then as well. Need to make a trip to Urmston Aquatics one day. It's a mission driving an electric car from London. Yeah, it's a long journey, that, mate. I actually travelled down there not so long ago just for work, to work for one of the sites we've got down there. But it's a long journey. It depends what fish you're going to be looking at. I mean, if you're primarily going up for the African cichlids, I'd ring up first and see what he's got in, because he does sell them quick when he gets them in. But he has stopped taking sort of reservations and stuff on them now, and just sort of opening it up on the weekend, first come, first serve. But if you've got a few different tanks, you know, and there's a few things you want to look at there, they've got an amazing selection of fish. It is a really unique fish shop. They've got some real rare finds in there as well. You know, stuff that's quite hard to get hold of. Great dry goods section. So they've got all sorts of scaping materials, terrarium stuff, tropical plants fridge, plants in tanks as well, what you can buy in bunches. It's a really cool shop to go to. So yeah, I mean, if you don't mind the drive, it's definitely worth a visit. It's a really good one. Another good one is Pier Aquatics as well in Wigan. So what I'd probably suggest is if you're coming up this way and you're doing that long drive, maybe get yourself to 2 or 3 good shops up this end. The top 3 I'd recommend to you is The Abyss in Stockport, Urmston Aquatics in Manchester, and then Pier Aquatics in Wigan. They are 3 amazing shops that would make that journey worthwhile. So yeah, keep them in mind, mate. Make a note of them. If you're going to make the trip, and it's going to be a 4 or 5 hour drive, get to them 3 while you're up here, because you won't regret it. They're all good shops to get into, even if you're just looking at them. Really good. But again, African cichlids is a gamble in any shop when you go into them, because the good ones go dead quick, and then you end up with you can walk in and they'll only have a batch of the ugly ones left because they've sold the decent ones. But that's one of the reasons, like we were talking about juicing and stuff earlier. One of the reasons why, I'm taking a step back from peacock cichlids a little bit, because they're so prone to that practice before they get into the UK. So it's a little bit off-putting when you see, even when I see really fired up ones now, I'm still reluctant to buy them in case they are juiced, because you never know, especially when you're looking at the bigger ones too. When you're looking at smaller ones, if you've got a small tiny fish that's got adult colorations on it, that is a telltale sign that the fish is juiced, because when they're about an inch up to about 10 centimetres, they shouldn't be looking nuclear at that point. They might show signs and a little bit of hint of colour, but if they're looking nuclear and they're only tiny fish, or every single fish in the tank is showing colour, that's a sign that it's a juice batch. So they're the ones you've really got to be careful of. But it is so hard to tell. You don't really know until they start getting in your tank and then they start colouring down. The Mbuna tank's another one as well, which I'm on the fence with, because I've got my Malawi hawks in here. You can see I've got about 7 of them left out of 10. I've lost 3 of them. I bought 10, I've lost 3. But they're getting to a nice, they're putting a little bit of size on, very slow growing fish. But this is what I want to do. I want to either get the Mbunas into a different display, or hand them off entirely to somebody who wants them, and then use this tank, this display, as a grow out tank for these rare haps, what I was talking about earlier. So if I can get them in smaller sizes, I'll simply chuck them in this tank with the Malawi hawks, feed this tank quite heavy, and then allow them to grow and get to a size where I can sex them, move them on into the display tank once they're big enough and I know they're a male fish. And then any female fish, I can offload them to breeders and people who might want to breed these haps themselves. I did want to breed them personally. I did have a bit of a breeding project what I was going to do downstairs. But it got to a point where I realised, the scale that I'd need to set up for a proper hap breeding setup. I'd need more tanks, places where I can hold the females, because I wouldn't want to be putting them in this display tank up here, because it would just cause an absolute bomb of aggression. But at the same time, I'd be sad to see the Mbunas go from this, because it's a pretty cool tank. But still, I think it'd look cool with, some small star sapphires growing out in there. The Mdoka white lips, I wouldn't mind growing some of them out. Yellow lecturus, that's another one that I want. Malawi trout. Malawi trout, I cannot find anywhere. The last time I saw them, someone was selling them on eBay. And they don't, unfortunately, well, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, you can't get older fish on eBay anymore, but, it's to protect the animals. But yeah, eBay don't let you sell livestock on there with fish and shrimp and things like that anymore. So that was the only place I've ever seen them for sale. Must have been a breeder just knocking them out on eBay. But that's one that I really want, is the Malawi trout. Rhodesii as well. There's loads that I've got my eye on that I'd want to keep and grow out in this display. But it's getting, this is the frustrating part with African cichlids, is, when you really get into it, it gets a little bit like Pokemon and you want to collect them all, which is what I want to do with the haps. I want a little bit, I want a little bit of everything in that display tank. And I feel like using this Mbuna display and changing it into a grow out tank is the only option that I've really got to land these nice haps. But I think it'll look cool. I think it'll be a nice little project. I think it'll make some good footage and videos for the YouTube channel. Is to follow the haps as they grow. So, unlike this, the big tank, we've done a lot of videos on the big tank, but we've chucked, ready to go fish in there. These are all fish that have already coloured up. Some have bloomed over time, but I think when you're watching them from this smaller stage, like you look at these Malawi hawks now and what they're going to turn into, I think would be, be really interesting to see and sort of how long it takes for it to get to that size and what everybody needs to expect when they're buying these fish at fry stage. And I think it'd be educational for people as well, because I think this is another problem with African cichlids and why I don't think the demand for them is there. And that is because the majority of African cichlids, bar your Mbunas, which again goes hand in hand with this, are also the ones that are sold. In shops quite often. They all have the colours still. So when you're looking at sort of haplochromuses, peacock cichlids, when shops buy them in batches, usually when they're in the shop at that point, they don't have any colour. So they look like relatively boring fish. And obviously people don't want to buy boring fish. But I think when you realise what they actually turn into when they get a little bit bigger, might help create a little bit more demand for them. So yeah, it'd probably be an interesting little project that, which I'm looking forward to doing. But I don't know what I'm going to do with the Mbunas as of yet. Blue neon for over a year and that dull brown colour put me off. Put him in my grow out tank. Showed amazing colours. Yeah, I think that is one of the coolest parts about having these fish, is when you've got one that's boring and then it starts developing a little bit of colour, starts putting a little bit of size on, and that gets exciting. That's what makes it exciting. I've had it loads of times with, a lot of the haplochromuses in this tank. They've been dulled down, looked a little bit boring. And then as soon as they hit a certain point, then they'll start colouring up and getting those nice colours. And that is what makes it rewarding. You feel like you've got a nice reward out of it then. So yeah, peacocks are quite notorious for that. Haps usually, hold the colours quite well, but peacocks are a little bit up and down. But it's really cool once they start hitting that point and they start colouring up, and you're coming down every day, and they're looking brighter and brighter and brighter as the days go by. It's one of the pros to keeping these fish, I think. I've found that I've had really good success with peacock cichlids when I've made sure that my water parameters are spot on. So, you know, in the past, I've had these tanks when I was younger, been quite lazy with them. You know, I'll be open, I'll admit it, where I wasn't testing my water parameters and I wasn't, you know, making a big song and dance about it. And I would be keeping them in, you know, the pH probably be like 7.2, 7, 7.5, not quite at the point where they thrive. But ever since I've been sort of monitoring my pH and the water hardness carefully, and I've been using the right kind of scaping stones and substrate to go into the tank to really balance it out and maintain it, I've had great results from fish colouring up. And also the water changes as well. I've really upped my game on water changes. Now I'm a little bit older and I'm a little bit more boring. So I'll dedicate a day every week. The big African cichlid gets a 30% water change. The Mbuna display gets a 50% water change because it's got it's on a canister filter, that one, it's not on a sump. But yeah, I've really been on top of the water changes and making sure that nitrates are really low. You know, they're not getting to, yeah, you can let your nitrates run up a little bit. I'm not saying that, but what I've tried to do is minimise the nutrients that are in the water column. And through doing that, I've had really great results, not only from coloration, but from growth rates as well. So the growth rates of the fish in this tank seem to be really skyrocketing in comparison to, you know, previous tanks that I've had when I've been a little bit younger, where maybe, you know, I've done bi-weekly water changes on it. You know, if I'm honest, sometimes I've left it 3-4 weeks and just topped it up when it's evaporated. But I'm a lot more dedicated to it now. But I've noticed great results just from doing that with my water parameters, making sure that they're stable, making sure that they're getting, you know, water changes weekly. And I've had great results off the back of it. I've never had any sort of outbreaks of anything, touch wood, like, you know, white spot. You know, it's been a nice smooth journey with this tank. The problems I've had, mainly aggression, fish getting beat up. That's when I've had deaths. I had a strawberry peacock that popped its clogs a couple of weeks ago. Could not explain to you what happened there. So I've got no idea what killed that fish. It had no signs of illness. You know, no signs of stress. It hadn't coloured down. It wasn't behaving differently. No signs of it being beat up. So no ripped fins, no tag marks on the side. Absolutely no signs whatsoever of something killing that fish. Even when I pulled it out of the tank, you know, it was still in full colour. It was just looked like a plump, nice, healthy fish. No signs of bloat, Malawi bloat either. So it really was a mystery, that one. It just sort of snap. I come down one day and it was sort of on the bottom of the tanks, a lot more than it usually is. And then within a couple of hours, it was belly up on the floor. So it was a fish I've had for a long time. However, it wasn't reaching the end of its lifespan. Should have had a good couple more years in it, at least. Yeah, so it really was a mystery, that one. No other fish have been sick or showed any signs of illness or anything off the back of that. So that really was a mystery death in the tank. But yeah, don't run a UV on this either. I've run UV sterilizers in the past to control, you know, breakouts and things like that. I didn't use it for algae control. I run a slower flow rate through it to target protozoa. But I've not run a UV on this one, and I've not, I've not missed it. I've not noticed an increase in algae. I've not noticed an increase, any, diseases breaking out or anything like that. One particular fish I have struggled with, and I continue to struggle with when I put it in this African cichlid display, is the Taiwan reef cichlid. For some reason, unbeknownst to me, I can't keep them alive. And I don't know why. I've had 4 in this tank, and they've all come from different shops. So it's not like it's all coming from the same batch, the same supplier, and it's a weak fish and I'm buying it and it's got stuff wrong with it. For some reason, every time I get a Taiwan reef cichlid, and I've had them in, a good 3-4 inch size when I put them in, I just can't keep them alive. It's dead frustrating because it's a really, really nice fish. And I don't know what the issue is with it. But I've spoken to some fish shops who've had them in. And even they've said when they've had batches in, they've found them, they've had quite a big drop off of fish, of Taiwan reef cichlid. So I don't know what it is. It just seems like a really finicky African cichlid. And my water parameters are spot on in this tank. They always have been. They're consistent. So yeah, I don't know what it is with them. I'd really love one. I'd love to have one in the tank because it'd give me that yellow pop, which I need alongside the Venustus. But it's really tough one, that. What's the best treatment for cloudy eye? Yeah, it's salts are a good one. So a little bit of salty water will help clear it up. And sometimes sort of your antibacterial medication as well can help with that. I had a red empress in this tank a while ago, which did suffer with that cloudy eye. And I think what was happening is I had a pair of Synodontis catfish in this display. I've only got one of them now, and I think they did it. I think they sort of created a lesion on the eye, and it didn't recover from that cloudy eye. It would go away. So I'd treat it in a little bit with salt. When I put it back in the tank, it would clear up, but then it would come back after time. So it was sort of on and off. I could never fully get rid of it. It just kept going, and then sort of the same problem would pop up again, and it'd get one cloudy eye. It would only ever get it in one eye, and it was the same eye every time it got it. So I don't know if it was, maybe something that was running a little bit deeper with that fish, or, if it was just a lesion that wasn't healing correctly. I don't have that fish anymore, unfortunately. I think that was, it got really beat up. So once it, funnily enough, it was the tank boss, that red empress. And once it started developing this cloudy eye, it lost its colour. It really started to become subdominant, and then it was getting beaten up by some of the haps when they started growing in. And eventually, I think it just died from stress. But yeah, it was a really tough one. I've had fish come down when fish have been missing an eye as well. So if I come down and the fish's eye is completely gone overnight due to aggression. But part and parcel of keeping these fish in it, I suppose. Andy, how do fish shops get away with juicing fish, but we can't get the same food? Just don't get it. Right, so Andy, with fish juicing, it doesn't happen in the fish shops. So when the shops get these fish, they are already juiced. So what happens is when Thailand sell these shops in bulk, not just Thailand, but Thailand is prolific for it. When they sell them in bulk, which are the suppliers to the shops, they will dose the fish with this hormone-regulated food or injections or whatnot. Usually it's through food. in order to create as many male fish and colourful fish as they can, to supply it to fish shops. So regardless of whether the fish shops are asking for colour, they'll just do it anyway. So it's a common practice, which they do to sell in bulk. And it's not often fish shops that are juicing the fish. If it is, you know, they're breaking the law, because that food shouldn't be available in the UK. So you know, if a shop is juicing the fish themselves, they shouldn't be. It's not allowed in the country. They're not allowed to do it here. My fish shop showed me the food they have, but wouldn't give me any, so I don't buy from them anymore. So, I mean, there is some foods on the market which are marketed to colour up African cichlids, but they're not necessarily, they don't contain the hormones that is bad practice. So there's one in Australia which sell I've seen it on I think it's on, what's her name now? It's an Australian girl. She primarily does African cichlids. She was in a fish shop, and the fish shop was actually using, you know, a special kind of food that colours up the fish. I did do some research on that food myself, and it doesn't contain the hormones that some of these places do use. So I'm not quite sure what's in it, if it's just some heavy dose of carotenoids, which does help to colour up your fish. But it's I'm not entirely sure if it'd be the same sort of gear that they're using abroad before they import them. South Bay sapphires, also with aggression, I use crossover wave maker. Wave makers are amazing for African cichlid tanks. I cannot recommend them enough to people that aren't using them. They create a massive distraction, they do. When chases are going on, they will blow fish off course during the chase, really break things up. They are great for picking up poo and uneaten food and things, and taking it into your intake or your overflow. So there is so many benefits to wave makers in an African cichlid tank. Definitely stand by that, South Bay. Good shout. So if you're not using wave makers, definitely consider it. Really beneficial. Nice to catch you live. Yeah, good to have you here, JJ. We're just talking about sort of the difficulty of purchasing African cichlids, problems that you can have when you're buying them, you know, the rarity of some of the haps, the availability of some of them, juicing, you know. Katie Cichlids, that's the one. There's a shop she goes into in Australia where they're feeding their fish some kind of food, like bright nuclear red pellets, but it's not a hormone in that food that is activating the coloration. It's not a good idea to do it, even if you can get hold of that food anyway. Still not a good idea to feed it to the fish, because it does long-term damage to their growth. You know, it can stunt growth long-term. It can make them sterile, which affects behaviours and dominance and things like that. So, you know, even if you can get hold of it, it's not a good idea to get it anyway. Star Sapphire is looking great. My all-time favourite cichlids. Yeah, South Bay, it is also my favourite African cichlid as well. Really unique, really cool. Funnily enough, he's quite a slow grower, this one. He's not put on a lot of size over the past 12 months. He is starting to develop a lot more of the chips on his body. So when I bought him, he only had 1 or 2 chips. So the development of those chips has been really nice. What I've always wanted to do, which I think would be awesome, is just keep a tank with just star sapphires. I'd love just a star sapphire only display. I think it'd look amazing. Just because the female's actually still quite an interesting colour anyway. So they're not like dull like some of the peacock cichlids are. You're still getting a little bit of blue in them. So I'd love to do something like that. Livingstone's holding. Yeah, the Livingstone's a cool fish as well. Mine in here is very up and down. He colours up from time to time, and then sort of colours down, goes dull again. But yeah, he's quite an interesting fish. Spends a lot of time, most of his time at the bottom, but they are sort of, you know, the ambush predators. That's how they hunt. Warmy, thank you, mate. Appreciate that. Slow growth times patient minds, 5 inches, about 3 years old. Yeah, 3 years old, wow. Yeah, I would have thought they'd have been sort of, because they get big, don't they? So I would have thought by sort of 3 years they'd be really maxing out in size. But they do have about a 10, 11 year lifespan, don't they, I suppose? So yeah, he does grow slow, this star sapphire. He is growing, you can tell, but he's not like, you know, some of the predator haps in here have just got insane growth rates on them. That Fusco that you can see next to the Venustus was about the size of the albino blue dolphin you can see there in screen. And he has just, he must have put about 3 inches on in the space of 6 months, to the point where he's an absolute beast now. He's probably the tank boss out of the majority of the fish in there. 30 sapphires growing out at the moment. Yeah, I've seen that, JJ. I'd be quite interested to see how that tank looks when they all grow in. That would look really cool. So yeah, I think that would be maybe a future project for you. That'd be really unique, because I've seen the odd one on YouTube where they've been sort of museum grade star sapphire displays. But for someone to do it at home, I think would look ace. That'd be really awesome project. I'd love to see someone do. Again, that'd be something, you know, if I had more space for tanks, I'd do that myself. But currently, I can't get any more tanks in here, nor do I really want any more, because I think as soon as I've set up this 7-footer, the paludarium, once I've got the tank in here, and I've got that one to maintain as well, along with the Mbuna display, and, you know, my smaller tanks downstairs, I think that's going to be, I'm going to be at full capacity as far as maintenance goes there, because what I don't want to do is, you know, end up with a routine where I'm skipping things. So I'm skipping my glass cleaning 1 week, and then I'm skipping a water change on a tank the other week. I want to keep my routine how it is, because I'm getting good results out of it. So as much as I'd love to get another tank, I wouldn't ideally want to do it just because, you know, I don't want to take on too much, along with making videos and editing and things like that as well. I think it'd take over my life. 1-year-old star sapphire about 2 inches. Need to do an update on my star sapphire Connolly, but I have a few vids on them a couple of months ago. Let me there you go. 1 second. What I'm going to do is I'll subscribe to your channel, South Bay, because I'd be interested to take a look at that. I think that look really cool. Bit of a mix in there at the moment. Get another tank in the new year. Having a shuffle. Too many tanks can lead to burnout as well. Yeah, 100%. I agree. This is a very addictive hobby, and it's very easy to want a little bit of everything. And go out, see a tank, impulse buy it. I mean, part of the fun of the hobby is the initial setup of the tank itself. And once you've set the tank up and you've got everything in it, you want to do it all over again, but you don't want to get rid of the fish that you've already got. And that's where the problem comes in. And that's when that's where multiple tank syndrome starts becoming a problem, because it's, you start biting off more than you can chew just to get that, dopamine buzz off setting up another tank. So it's, you've really got to have a little bit of self-control once you get to a certain point. Yeah, 100% is an addiction, definitely, 100%. It's like with these African cichlids. I'd love to have a big Mbuna tank. I'd love to have a big Tropheus display as well, and a big sort of fairy cichlid, Tanganyikan frontosas. There's so many different tanks you can have, but I'm very particular with my tanks, so I don't like to mix everything into a big tank. Like, I see people with African cichlids and they'll put frontosas in with Malawis and stuff, which is fine. It can be, you can be successful doing that and have a good ride and stuff, but it's a personal thing that I've got. It's like an OCD. So I can't mix, multiple fish from different places in one tank. They have to be biotopes. So I have to have, Amazonian fish, I'll only have in an Amazonian tank. Fish that live in Asia, I'll only have in an Asian tank. African fish, I'll only have in an African tank. It's just like a personal obsession what I've got. So it's not that I think it's breaking the rules and you can't do it and you shouldn't do it. It's in my own head. I can't do it personally. I fell into MTS, Medaka, Rainbow Shiners, Wild Better. Rainbow Shiners are cool. I really like them. They're nice looking fish. The Wild Betters. Yeah, some of the Wild Betters are nice as well. 125 star sapphire colony, wow. That would be an absolute vision. I'd love to see that. Really would love to see that. It's given me the itch to do it in a tank, because I think it looks so cool. I absolutely love my star sapphire in this tank. If anything happened to that fish, I would be mortified. I'd be absolutely mortified. Absolutely love it to bits. I was so excited when I found it as well, because it was just the right size to go in my tank. And I've been looking for one that was a decent size for a long time. The Malawi eye biter is another one of my favourites. I had a bit of a bad experience with one of them a couple of months ago. Tried breeding it, reintroduced it into this display, and it was just turned into a murderer. When I put it in the tank, it dropped all its colour. It became a little bit of a subdominant fish. After a few weeks, it got its colour back, started getting a little bit boisterous. I took it out to breed. So I separated it into another tank down in my cellar. I put 3 female eye biters in with it, and it murdered every single one of them. I then tried to reintroduce it back into my main display, and it just terrorised it. It was so aggressive. One of the most aggressive African cichlids I've ever had in the history of keeping these fish. It was a murderer. I separated it again. I put it back down into a display in the cellar, because it killed one of my Fuscos that was in this tank. It beat it to death. So I ended up getting rid of it and offloading that fish to somebody who could cater for it in a predator hap display. but he was beating my fish senseless. So although I love him and I love how they look and the look of him, I wouldn't get another one. I have got one in the tank, but it's a female. So it's not, it doesn't show any aggression, it's not boisterous. It's quite calm and placid, minds its own business. So I have got one in there at the moment, which is a female, which I think I owe a life in there, because when it was in the tank with the Malawi iBuyer, it got absolutely beat with an inch of its life. It lost all its fins. So I put it back in this tank, and I think I owe it a good life in this tank now. I don't need to worry about it breeding with anything, I don't think, unless it's going to cross. But it's, it lives quite peacefully in this display, and I'm not too fussed about the colour of it. And I feel a little bit guilty about the ordeal that it went through off the back of that breeding project. So that's the reason I'm keeping it in here. Yeah, iBite is quite chill. I've had them in the past, JJ, and I've not had a problem with them. So I have had them in the past and had them with peacocks and harps, and they've been pretty chilled, pretty calm and placid. Obviously, you're going to get a bit of aggression, but nothing like what I saw off that last one was really, really concerning. Next, my tank's going to be a 90-gallon cell breeding Malawi. Trout, they go for it. Chef Steve, if you can breed any Malawi trout, or you know anywhere that I can get hold of one of those fish, please let me know, because I was saying earlier in the live, I am desperate to find a Malawi trout. So if you can get hold of them, mate, in the future, if you have any that are breeding, please give me a shout on TikTok or something and let me know, mate, because I'll travel however far I need to travel to get that fish. I absolutely love it. Really cool harp. Try the sunset harp. It's more mellow than the iBuyer, looks like. South Bay, I've actually got a sunset harp in this tank. I think it's also called a Strigatus, and I'll show you it now. He's this one. So he's not an iBuyer. He's a compressor-seps, but he's called a Strigatus. Now, I have heard of the sunset harp, and I think it's probably the same fish, if not a slightly different strain, but I don't have any issues at all with that Strigatus. He's a cool looking harp. He was actually sold to me as an iBuyer at a smaller size, and I thought he was an iBuyer until I actually got a real iBuyer in the tank, and then I could really see, I could see the subtle differences between the two, which is when I found out he was the Strigatus. But yeah, he does really well inside this tank. He is a little bit aggressive, but nothing over the top. Nothing that's any concern. He doesn't beat fish up or do any damage. Cheers, JJ. Thanks for joining. Yeah, that's the same fish. Yeah, they're similar. I really like him. He's a nice fish. He's probably one of the oldest fish in the tank. I've had him quite a long time. And again, he's a slow grower too. So he was bigger than a lot of these fish that are in the tank now when I got him. And he's getting outgrown by some of the peacocks and stuff now. So yeah, he's growing quite slowly. I don't think they get as big as the iBuyers, but I still think he's got some size to put on as well. He's got a bit of growing to do. So yeah, I'm excited to see how that fish turns out, to be honest. I think it's a great alternative to a Malawi iBuyer if you want something a little bit less risky in your display. But what I'm looking for now is I want a couple of hard to get hold of harps, stuff that's quite difficult to get hold of. some show-stopping fish, which I'm, you know, as like I said earlier, I'm going to have to use a grow-out tank to do that, but it is what it is. You know, if I'd have started this plan earlier this year, you know, I'd already be on my way to getting some decent sized fish, but I've been very reluctant to do it to try and avoid buying females in these batches. But it seems to be the only way that I'm going to be able to do it for the time being. If anyone knows of any good places or decent breeders of haps, please let me know, because I'd be very grateful. I'm willing to travel, you know, to go there. But you know, it's like I said, I've been to Wharf Aquatics today, because they've got a couple of haps on their list that I haven't got. They had the Mdoka White Lips, which I wouldn't mind getting one of them. And then I can't quite remember the name of the other one. It wasn't a common name. You know, it was Latin name on the tank. But they only had 2 females left. So I was coming away from that tank, that shop, disappointed. Not from the fault of the fish shop, but I was too late to get there. The Mdokas needed treating, so the tank needed treating. They weren't for sale, which in all honesty is great practice from Wharf Aquatics. You know, I wasn't angry about that. It was good to see, and I think a lot of fish shops should do that, but they wouldn't sell me the fish because they were looking stressed, potentially a case of white spot ready to break out. They closed down the whole line of tanks, wouldn't sell anything, which I respect. I think that's a really good move from a fish shop, and I think it tells you that they care about what they're doing and the health of the fish more than making a quick profit. So yeah, a lot of respect for him for doing that. Going to clubs is best and cheapest way to get your fish. What does that entail, Steve? What sort of clubs are you going to? Are these like auctions? Yeah, I've got Malawi Hawks, South Bay. I'll give you a quick look at them now. So I've got these in this Mbuna display, and I've got 7 of them. You can see them at the back there. So they're only at small stages at the moment. They're about 6-7 centimeters. They're not showing any sexual dimorphism yet, so I can't tell, you know, if I've got any males or females in there. I did have them in a separate tank away from the Mbunas, but when I closed the breeding setup downstairs, then they had to go in this tank. But I'm thinking of getting rid of the Mbunas and just having this as a hap grow out tank. But I've got 7 Malawi Hawks in there at the moment, which I'm excited to get to a good size and start colouring up. Going to fish clubs, yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't mind getting to something like an auction or something like that. It's just, I'll be honest with you, I've been in this hobby for so many years, and never really thought about, you know, I've never really looked into the auctions and clubs and stuff, and I'd love to get into something like that, you know, and speak to other people that are as in love with these fish as I am, because I could talk to people for hours. It's you know, amongst your own friend groups and stuff, it's really hard to find, you know, people you can have an in-depth conversation with about these fish. And I think it's one of the main reasons that I did turn to making YouTube videos and doing TikTok content and stuff, because, you know, I wanted someone I could talk to about the fish and share the knowledge with. Bucachromis, yeah, I wouldn't mind a Bucachromis. I did have a yellow Lepturus at one point, which I did grow out to a size I could put in this display, but as soon as I put it in this display, it died within an hour. And I think it was the stress of the bigger fish. And also, stupidly, I didn't think to acclimate the fish into this other tank. So I don't know if it was a combination of, you know, the big fish, it was stressed, getting scared, and then the shock of maybe different water parameters that killed it in such a quick amount of time. It was really stupid of me to do, to be honest, but I was, you know, I assumed with these tanks being side by side and me doing the same sort of maintenance, filling them from the same tap water, that I wouldn't really need to worry about acclimating the fish. But in hindsight, you know, the more I think about it and how quickly that thing died when I put it in this tank, you know, I think that could have been an error on my part, to be honest with you. If you join fish clubs, you can find networks that can help you find the fish you want. Yeah, I might have to have a look at that, Steve, and see see if I can get into something like that and start finding some of these haps. Because it's, you know, it's just stuff that I really, really want, that I'm getting frustrated and constantly disappointed when I'm going out searching for them. Right, guys, I think I'm going to call it a day on that live. Thank you for everybody who joined and interacted with the chat. If you don't follow me on TikTok, come and follow me on TikTok as well, because I do a few lives on there throughout the week. And I do plan on doing some more lives on YouTube. The times I tend to do lives is when, you know, I've got a busy week and I'm struggling to put a video together and edit it and get it ready in time to drop on the usual weekend. So it's usually when I do lives, it's when I'm a little bit behind schedule, but we'll try and get a few more on in the week and stuff and interact with everybody, answer questions and things like that. And then we'll obviously, you guys obviously help me, giving me information on where to get these fish and stuff as well. So much appreciated. Appreciate everyone joining. And then, yeah, thanks everyone. We'll see you soon.